The opera and ballet, union work and practice strategies with Amanda Swain. Stay inspired. Thank you, and let's get started. So just diving in, Amanda, into your specialized work as an opera and ballet musician, I'd love to start the chat with one of our attendees, Marissa, who has asked, what do you love most about your job?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. Well, I certainly miss the live performance aspect right now of getting to do opera and ballet. There are so many things that I love, and things are just like popping in my mind left and right now. Right now, one of the first things I just thought of was playing Nutcracker. And so many musicians, after playing it for decades, after doing it 30 to 40 times a year, I feel like sometimes miss the magic of it, and of seeing all the children come and want to interact with you and see what it is you're playing and ask you questions about your instrument. So I think the audience interaction component, when you're in a pit, where we kind of sometimes we feel a little bit like zoo animals, because they come and look over at us, and we're in our natural habitat. And, we have signs that say "Don't feed the musician." No, I'm just kidding. No, we don't. But I miss interacting with audience members because they find it to be such a unique opportunity, because we will talk to them if they come up to us, versus like at a symphony orchestra concert where there's almost like a barrier at the stage, and it doesn't really feel appropriate for audience members to come up to the stage edge and talk to the musicians. For some reason, that's removed when you're in a pit orchestra, which I find pretty interesting. So I really miss that component of performance, specifically when you're playing in a pit. And on the musical side, I miss working with singers. Playing with singers is one of the best things I think we can do as instrumentalists. I feel like, for me personally, playing the bassoon is how I express my voice without speaking. It's a language for me. It's a way to communicate. And so much of the time I get inspiration for how to do that better from singers, from these amazing opera singers. And we truly get some of the best at Houston Grand Opera. The same stars that are singing at the Met come down and sing with Houston. So it's some of the best singers in the world. And I think that listening to singers can really better inform us as wind players in how we approach vibrato, approach phrasing, so things seem natural, approach breathing, places to breathe, as well as the physical aspect of how to breathe in a really effective way. So those are a couple of favorite things. That was a good question. Thanks.
Marissa shared a follow-up, just very interesting about missing the audience.
Nicole Haywood, hello. I'll go ahead and talk to Nicole for just a second. Nicole and I met 4 or 5 years ago, maybe, and you came and took a lesson.
Yes, I remember driving over to Houston when I was at UT to take some lessons with Amanda. Well, I was preparing for Meg Quigley one time. Right. And then I remember one of my favorite lessons with you. Well, I was actually over a Mildy scale study, and I just remember you being like, it's not even, and you showed me practice techniques that, as like a freshman or sophomore in college, that I didn't know how to practice. I mean, Kristen Wolf-Jensen was helping me mold that, but I do remember. It's always good when I remember a lesson. When I don't remember a lesson, it's usually not a good sign. But yes.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I remember when you came up, and I remember when you moved to Houston for when you were here, I guess at Rice, maybe. And yes, you lived across the bridge from me, kind of across Allen Parkway.
Yeah.
So we've been around for a while, and it's just really good to see you. And thanks for the comment about the lessons. I'm really big on those. Whenever you're doing any sort of technical or skill study, especially with Mill Day, like approaching it, those etudes specifically, as purely an exercise, and how exact can you be? I mean, there are so many other opportunities for musical expression and lyricism, and I think it's important to sometimes isolate a very specific portion of your practicing. And with those, I think that playing them exactly as written with no rubato, so that there's no, fishing around for easier ways to do things, is a really interesting way to play them. And
Yeah.
to do the exact opposite and play them hyper musically and turn them into lyrical etudes, but I don't think that's what they're really best suited for. So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, you're awesome. Yeah, no, I remember that lesson so many years ago.
Michael Burns has shared, I agree about how great it is to play with great singers. So much in common with us as wind players. Yes, Michael, would you like to share any more about that? Or it's wonderful to hear from you. And
Sure. Hi, everybody. I too have done a lot of playing in pits and for opera, and I recall one time actually back in New Zealand, but there was a really phenomenal world-class tenor who was a New Zealander, but he had been not only at the Met, at La Scala and everywhere, and we were doing, I can't remember what the rep was exactly, but it was a huge orchestra. And this guy would just stand up on the stage and was so unbelievably relaxed and would obliterate the orchestra's sound just by himself, just, this huge sound. And where I was sitting, I could watch him breathe and just seeing how he used his body. But also I was just amazed at the level of sound, and it was gorgeous, but just the power that he had, and it was so relaxed. It's what I strive to try to do on the bassoon, not always successfully. That it's just like, we're like to try and be loud, and he was just, and it was incredible. So I mean, and there are so many examples like that where you'll play with a singer, and I always like what Amanda was saying with the language. I guess I also think of that I'm singing and the bassoon is my voice, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for sharing. I think that whenever you have one singer singing with an orchestra, it's either you're going to hear the singer beautifully, or the orchestra has to be really, really tamped down. And I love it when you don't have to tamp down the orchestra, and it's just one singer who can manage to drown out an entire like Verdi orchestra, and it sounds effortless. You're right, and you feel it in your soul when a singer can sing that way. Yeah, that's always really, really nice when the conductor doesn't have to keep going over and over again, so you can hear the one singer. That is powerful when you get a good one like that, for sure.
Thinking about playing with singers, Amanda, and like being able to anticipate when their entrances are, and coordinating that with the conductor and your colleagues. Do you have any tips and advice for preparing for that?
Yeah, I think the best thing you can do is know what the singer has most of the time when you're playing, because that's really your guidebook as to how you're going to play. If you're playing with the conductor and something happens, which happens in live music, a stage cue goes wrong, somebody comes in incorrectly in the orchestra or on stage, and things kind of get a little helter-skelter for a minute. For me, the audience isn't going to know if you're playing with the conductor. They're going to know if you're not with the singer. So my primary guide is usually the singer, and knowing what they have can get you out of a bind really, really quickly. We had something go awry in Don Giovanni a couple of years ago. I have no idea what it was that happened, but all of a sudden everything was off and orchestra members started dropping out because it was just one of those confusing moments. I had a solo entrance because Mozart loves his solo bassoons in opera, and I heard the singer, and I just went with the singer. I didn't look at the conductor, and everything came back together within a couple of seconds. And I'm sure there were other orchestra members who did the same. It's not a hero story. It's just about knowing and understanding what's going on stage, because it's not only does it inform your interpretation and inform your performance, but it's imperative for a good performance for the audience, for yourselves, for the singers, if everyone knows what all is going on. So score study is so important, and I feel like younger students like in college and younger, just don't really understand why score study is so important, whether it's opera or ballet or symphony or chamber music or whatever it is. And I don't remember if I told this story or not on the interview earlier. I think I might have, but I had an audition for NRO when I was in college. It was for Carl Topolo, who just retired as the music director for NRO. And I was playing Una Furtiva Lagrima, which is a big bassoon excerpt, of course. And I was playing through it, and at the end he goes, "Tell me what's going on underneath that." And I couldn't answer it. I felt so stupid. And I was like, never again will someone ask me that question. I'm not going to be able to answer it. So it's just some wisdom I would love for people to pass on to their students, why it's important, not only for ensemble cohesion, but just for personal awareness, because it affects how you play when you know what else is going on around you, which, I mean, all of you here are basically professional bassoonists. I mean, this is something that we all know. I just don't remember it being talked about all that much when I was a student. Maybe it was and I just wasn't paying attention. That's entirely possible. But yeah, so that's my spiel on score study.
Could you talk a bit more on your process?
Yeah, I think anytime you are learning an opera in particular, because they're so long and so very dense, it is important to have some sort of process, and a process that you enjoy. So one of the first things I do, if it's an opera I don't know, is find a recording. Pretty basic, and we're so lucky these days to have access to recordings of basically everything. Like, we don't have to wonder how something is supposed to go. We're pretty spoiled and kind of in that way, but it's also really, really helpful if you're learning a piece for the first time. So the first thing I do is listen to a recording without a score, without my part. Let's see, Richard Meek says the background to what you're playing shapes all your phrasing. Yeah, absolutely. 100%, especially with singers where their phrases end and whatnot. Yeah. So after I watch a recording, that's when I'll go through it again with a score, and I usually do a score first because it gives me a bigger overall picture, and then I'll go through the score and my part without a recording and just kind of make some notes of what I see, and then I go through a recording with my part, and then I start really kind of practicing the things that I need to, and I usually will play along with the recording at least once as well. Again, because it's so much music for a 4-hour opera that really the only way to get a really good sense of what's going on is to play it. And since we have the recordings, that's what I do.
Could you share more on the mental and physical endurance needed while playing numerous performances, and how to keep things interesting and stay healthy?
Yeah. So with repertory companies for opera and ballet, we do have multiple performances of everything, which has its advantages and disadvantages. Some people talk about, burnout and stuff when you have 40 nutcrackers in a season. My trick for Nutcracker, specifically, because it is so many performances, is to try to listen to a different instrument specifically each performance. So like one performance, I'll listen to the cellos. Another one, I'll listen to the clarinets. More like it's just a directional kind of assignment for myself. Like, what can I learn about what someone else is doing? And it's not like a 100% of the time thing. It's, when things are relatively simple and I know the music really well, I can really tune into something else. And I think that's a really good way to keep things interesting when you have to play something over and over again, is to try to learn something new about it each time. For the opera, we usually do somewhere between 5 and 8 performances of each one. And usually for those, for having multiple performances, it's about mental sharpness, I guess, and maintaining it through that high number of performances, and also just for the length of the performance. I remember my first season, how challenging it was to get through an entire opera without feeling kind of brain foggy by the end of it. And I remember specifically, we were doing, again, Don Giovanni. This was my first Mozart opera, my first season, which was like 9 years ago. And we got to the finale, and by that point, all the lines kind of started to look the same. I must have skipped like at least 3 or 4 different times in that finale. I was skipping lines. And TK DeWitt was the second bassoonist at the time. Some of you may know him. He's in Kansas City. And he was very patient as I was figuring this out. But I was shocked by how tired I was at the end of that. And it's just something you can't really practice for. You kind of just have to do it over and over again. And listening to operas also kind of helps build that stamina, I guess, like being able to focus for that long on something.
The work that you do for the union as vice president of the Regional Orchestra Players Association, could you tell us about what ROPA is and why it's important to get involved with the union in your area?
Yeah, I know we have a couple of ROPA orchestra people here. I think Marissa played in a ROPA orchestra in Erie, right? Yeah, that's right. And I've Facebook messaged Michael about it, I think, once, asking about if there were orchestras he played in that might work for ROPA. But I think union work is really, it's about collaboration. It's about working together. I think it's a lot of the same principles, actually, as playing in an orchestra together. It's about people working together to achieve something amazing. It seems like a lot of people, think of unions in general as just, something you pay money to, and, why bother paying the money when other people are paying it and I'm getting the same results, if you're in a right to work state. And I think it's really important that we all work together and support each other to make sure we're being treated fairly. We have good contracts, that we are communicating with management in a unified way, so that we have fair pay and really safe working conditions. It does make a difference when you work together and when you have a unified voice, just like it does when you play in an orchestra. And someone kind of taught me that lesson early on, when I got in tenure in the orchestras, and kind of explained these things to me and said, you should serve on an orchestra committee. And I said, I'd never even, read the CBA of this group, the collective bargaining agreement for this group, but sure, I'll be on the orchestra committee. And that's how it started. And now I've been on both of the orchestra committees and negotiating committees. I'm on our local executive board, and I'm vice president of the Regional Orchestra Players Association, which is the largest players conference in the AFM. And we just make sure that our member orchestras, all 90 plus of them, have a forum to discuss issues with each other, to be supported, legal assistance, whatever we can do to make sure our member orchestras are able to do what they love and also make a living doing it, which is all really important, and I feel really strongly about it. So if you're not involved with the musicians union, I would encourage you to get involved, because it's an important part of our ability to create music.
With these big works that you're working through, how do you be efficient with your time?
I think I'm more efficient at some points than others, as I think we all are. We kind of ebb and flow with our workflow and how much we have to do. And I think that's important too, to not be hard hitting 100% of the time, because that's how you get burnout and how you kind of lose the joy, I think, of making music. I think variety is really important when you're practicing. Having a routine is great, but making sure you're varying up the things you do within your routine. Not playing the exact same scale patterns every day would be a really basic one, right? Finding all sorts of different ways to make the bassoon challenging, right? Practicing your scales in sixths or sevenths, or doing really weird rhythm things with interval scales, I think is really fun. And I think if you approach practice as something creative, where it's not an obligation to sit down and do the same thing every day, but like, what am I going to do today to make this interesting and to keep myself engaged, I think makes you a better performer, a better player. Than when you get to your actual repertoire, you'll have interesting ways to approach technical issues there, and hopefully it'll fuel ideas for how you can play other pieces of music. I guess as far as efficiency, though, too, there's always the question of how much should I be practicing a day? My students ask me, well, how much do you want me to practice a day? And I'm like, well, whatever the number is to get the things done that you need to do, and no more than that. So for me, it's about 2 hours a day has always been my sweet spot of practice time. I don't think I've ever really practiced more than that in a day since like about high school. And I figured out that 2 hours a day, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, maybe another 30 minutes in the evening if I needed it, really allowed me to get everything done that I needed to and left me still feeling like I wanted to practice again the next day. The nice thing about learning music is we don't have to do it all immediately. It's a process, and our brain processes things overnight when we sleep so that the next day when we come back to it, there is going to be some improvement immediately. And I love that about practicing, that it's not stagnant, that there is constant growth, and that you can achieve that without burdening yourself by staying in the practice room for 4 to 5 hours a day. It leaves you time to explore other music and listen to music and look at scores and play with other people. I would say find your sweet spot of your practice time. I'd love to hear someone else's kind of thought on practice time and why it works for them, or what they would want to do differently, or what they've learned as they've kind of grown up practicing.
I just want to say it always makes me feel good when someone only practices 2 hours a day, because I also don't practice that much.
Yeah.
And so whenever someone practices 4 hours a day, I start to think, oh my gosh, am I doing something wrong? But like you said, it allows time for the score study and the reads, and I don't know, just being fresh, doing quality work. But it just always I'm so glad you don't practice 4 hours a day.
Yeah,
I always feel like I'm doing something wrong. But yes, being efficient and getting it done. I think in college I probably practiced more than 2 hours a day, but now in my later 20s, even during the pandemic, I'm curious kind of what your pandemic ebb and flow was. Like,
yeah, more
what
flow.
was it like? How
flow.
is it like?
That's a really interesting question. For a while there, after things shut down like completely early on, and there was no plan really for performing for a few months, I really didn't do much. I kind of shut down. I was like, well, why even practice? Why am I doing this? If I'm not making music, am I a musician? Like I really went through a little bit of like an internal sort of crisis in my head. Like, what am I doing here? And so eventually I picked it back up. I started recording Milde scale studies and concert studies for my students, so they had reference recordings. I made a few other videos and recorded the all-state etudes, which is a pretty low bar in terms of practicing goals, but it got me to do something. And I've been playing more recently. That opera's done a couple of projects, and I just did a really fun chamber music recording with the musicians from the Grand Teton Music Festival, which is on Facebook. If you want to listen, it's really fun. So now that I've actually had some things to practice for, it's probably closer to like an hour to an hour and a half a day than like a full 2 hours. And it's mostly at this point, etudes and playing through symphonies with a recording, which is a fun way to just play if you don't have anything coming up. Again, a really cool thing about being a musician in this century is that we have recordings of everything and we can play along with them. We don't have to just play in isolation. So if you're missing playing with a group, which I think most of us probably are, then playing through recordings is a really great way to learn new music, refresh yourself on music you haven't played in a while, and keep your chops up as well. So that's kind of what I've been doing the last couple months is playing along with recordings, mostly, and doing fun weird scale practices. Everyone, this is Lawrence, my cat. I'll introduce him since he's here. All right. He's been behind
Hello, Lawrence. Would love to hear what people do for audition preparations and competition.
Sure. So I obviously haven't done a competition in a couple of years now because I have officially aged out of most competitions, which feels okay to be past that point in my life. But we do have other things that we have practice goals for, whether it's an audition or a performance or a competition. And for me, organization and planning was always really helpful, like having certain things that I wanted accomplished by certain dates and keeping track of those goals written down was a really helpful way for me to keep track of what it was that I wanted to do, whether it was tempo goals or playing for other people by a certain date, taking a lesson with someone by a certain date, sending recordings to friends. I think that was one of the biggest, most helpful things in my preparation for auditions and for competitions was sending recordings to people, because you don't want to send something where you sound like crap. So you work really hard to make sure you have a decent recording to send to someone. And just that process in and of itself, aside from the awesome feedback that you might get from these people, is really, really valuable. So that's probably one of my number one tips for getting ready for anything, is making recordings and forcing yourself to send them to people. And then you do the same for other people, and you get used to giving critical feedback in a positive way. It's just helpful all the way around. And then I think when you're working towards something scary like a competition or an audition, knowing that the results of that event does not determine who you are as a person, or does not determine your worth and your value, and that it's just all part of your journey as a musician, and that you still hopefully approach your music and your instrument with joy and with compassion. I think Marissa, actually, when we did the Meg Quigley like a panel discussion a couple of months ago, I think you had talked a bit about compassion when you play. Would you mind saying anything about that and your philosophy with how you kind of approach things?
Yeah, I think when it comes to a high pressure situation, we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and that's a good thing. You know, that's what pushes us and motivates us, but it can also make us tear ourselves down, especially on an emotional level, that's bad too, but also on a physical level. If you're on stage and something happens and you're not forgiving enough of the little blip, then you can spiral out of control. And especially with the Vivaldi being memorized, that was a really important thing that I had to learn to be able to recover really quickly. Because if the music's not in front of you and you get distracted, then, you don't want to be in that situation. So just being accepting of the sounds that are coming out of your instrument. And that's not totally an original idea. I got that from Sharon Sparrow. She has a great book, 6 Weeks to Finals. It's like a audition prep Bible, but she talks a lot about that. And just when it comes to performance time, practice being accepting of what comes out so that you can stay focused and positive and radiating, confident, strong, all those things.
Yeah, for the auditions where I've been more successful, where I've made it like into finals and whatnot, I can specifically remember before I start playing, when I'm sitting on stage, taking a moment to take it in as like, this is a privilege to be playing here for these people in this space. And it really does change your attitude, I think, about how you play when you come at it from a position of being grateful for something versus having to do something. So often students, when you're taking auditions, like, I have to do this. There's this, and in some ways you do, because you're trying to get a job and, support yourself. But there's another aspect to it, and that we get to do this. And even when you're taking auditions and it is stressful and it is high pressure, I think being grateful can manifest itself in your performance and in how you play. It can make you more relaxed, right? It can get rid of tension when you have a moment of true gratefulness for being there, wherever there is in that moment, which I think is really important. But Marissa, thank you for sharing that. I know I just kind of threw you into the spotlight, but I really appreciate you saying that.
Amanda, would you like to share a bit more of just, yeah, how you do find that joy in playing, and of course, like you said, coming from a space of gratitude and excitement and appreciation?
Sure. Opera and ballet is always what I've wanted to do. So I always want to go to work and play my instrument. Like, to me, it's just really fun, and it makes it easy to be grateful when something is enjoyable. And music should be enjoyable, right? It's called playing an instrument. It's not called being forced to, make a sound on your bassoon. Play, right? Play, creative, exciting, positive connotations, play. And that's what I get to do. I get to play for my job. So knowing that is it makes it easy to be grateful when you love what you do. I also have amazing colleagues at Houston Grand Opera and Ballet. I play second bassoon in the ballet, and the principal bassoonist there, Mike Frederick, as he's been there for a couple of decades, and he's just the best, the absolute best. And he makes coming to work so much fun. He's constantly pulling little pranks on me and other people, and keeping us on our toes. But having colleagues, I think that that you enjoy working with, and that you have camaraderie with, and that you have relationships with whom you have relationships, is makes it easy again to be grateful. And then with the opera, the music itself, it's some of the best music that you'll ever get to play. I think I mentioned some of these in my interview with you the other week, Julie. But we did an opera a couple of years ago called The Passenger. I don't think I mentioned this one, but it was based on the experience of a Polish woman who was sent to a concentration camp when she was younger, and she wrote I believe it was a play that then got translated into a libretto and an opera. And it was one of the most powerful pieces of music and performances that I'd ever been a part of. And the author actually came to see a performance of it. We did the U.S. premiere of it, but we performed it up in New York for some festival. I don't remember what the festival was, but she came and watched, and I'm like, wow, what an amazing experience to get to be a part of this woman's story, and to experience through music something that she lived through that was so horrifying. So I think it's just such a powerful storytelling capacity that the opera has that other forms really don't, or don't have quite as easily. And that it's just something I love about going to work and playing opera, is the story aspect. That was kind of a wandering answer, but hopefully it all kind of comes together to make some sort of coherent sense. But yeah, it's just an amazing. Both companies are amazing and great music.
What is one class you wish you had taken in college and didn't, or it wasn't available and you wish had been?
So I know that you had asked me this question on email earlier to prepare me for it, and I've been thinking about it. And I'm like, wow, college was like 10 years ago. So I kind of had to think back. Probably a class I wish I had taken was advanced conducting studies. I only took the minimum required conducting because conducting is terrifying. So advanced conducting, I think it gives you, it's not just about the physical movement of conducting. It teaches score study and how to connect what you see on the page with what you hear, and as well as a bunch of other really useful skills in ensemble playing. And I wish I had taken it at Northwestern with Dr. Mallory Thompson, because she is a personal hero of mine and one of the most amazing conductors, most amazing women that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And I didn't take the class because I didn't want to do the actual conducting because, again, it's not my thing. I didn't like it in undergrad when I had to take it. So I didn't take it there, and I wish I had. So that's what I would tell my students. I think if they're in school and they have the credit hours to take something like that, I would take an advanced conducting class. I will say also kind of the reverse of that. One of my favorite classes that I took that I do kind of a mini version of with my students, and that I think everyone should do in school, is auditing other lessons. with other professors. I see some head nodding like, yeah, that's a good idea, because you get so much of a different perspective playing for people who don't play your instrument. They don't understand and or care about the limitations of the bassoon or what your reed's doing that day or how the weather is affecting things. They just know what they hear and how it should sound to them. I played for a violinist at Northwestern, and I was doing the Francais divertissement, I think, and I was doing one of the slow movements in the middle, and it's marked pianissimo or triple P or something really, really floaty tenor register piano, and he kept being like, "Can it be softer?" Like 3 times at least. Can it be even softer? And in my head, I'm going, no. But in reality, it could, and I had never really pushed myself quite that far. So auditing other professors' lessons and then playing for other professors as well, playing for other people who don't play your instrument, I found was really, really valuable in grad school. So we had to audit like 10 lessons a semester, where we go and sit in on someone else's lesson and observe things, which was really fun, and which I have my students do, or what I want to have them do when the COVID pandemic is over, and then play for other professors as well. Michael, did you want to comment, or you have something tangential to that?
Yeah, it's relating to that. During my master's degree, I was in a chamber group that took a class with a fabulous concert pianist, and it was on performance practice, and is exactly what you described, where he knew nothing about a wind quintet. And the mantras that he would say every class was, you had to bring your score and a pencil, and then you would play, and he would, critique, and had these fabulous ideas. But it was the same sort of thing. You'd be sitting on like a low B or a C sharp or something. He's like, no, it must be softer. It says pianissimo, and he didn't care. We'd be like, but maestro, and he's like, it says pianist. And we worked so incredibly hard, and it was, we were the only wind group in there. There were a bunch of string quartets and trios and piano trios and stuff like that. And he actually admitted to us at the end of the semester that we were the first group that had actually done wind group that had actually done what he'd said, because we were so terrified of the guy. But when I'm coaching a wind quintet now, I basically try to have some of that attitude. I'm like, yeah, unfortunately, I know too much about how hard this is, but I don't care. I don't care that you're a horn player and you've got a high D. You've got to play it, and it's going to be like this, and it's going to sound good, And it's like, don't give me the sob story. You chose this repertoire. So yeah, I mean, it's really, really good to have some of that perspective, I think.
Yeah, I wish more schools would offer courses like that, where you have more opportunity to go and interact with people who you don't normally get to interact with. I mean, I love teaching my students, and Marissa, I'll get you in just one second. I love teaching my students, and I think we have really valuable working relationships, but I keep telling them, like, there are so many smart people out there that you can learn from. Like, just having 1 hour a week with me is not going to get you the most out of your education that there could be, Marissa, did you wanna say something?
Yeah, not even just professors playing for other professors of different instruments, but also playing for different peers of different instruments. Like, we have studio class where we play for our peers of our instruments, and we tend to gravitate more toward seeking out other bassoonists to have listened to our excerpts, or have a little studio class, and tend to only invite one, your own instrument. But I find that bassoonists have their own baggage a lot of times when it comes to an excerpt or something that everybody knows. People can get sort of wrapped up in their own opinions about how they think Tchaik 4 should go, the Tchaik 4 second movement solo. And then they're giving you feedback about, maybe their own ideas because they've thought about it so much themselves, and they're not really, maybe commenting on just the way you sound or something even more, subjective or, removed. So playing for flute players and singers even, and just saying, what do you hear? What's sticking out?
Yeah, absolutely. Peer listening is super important too, which studio classes are great for. And going to play in other people's studio classes is also really fun if you're still at a collegiate level, for sure. I saw that Martin said in the chat that it was a requirement for the master's degree at Arizona State. It was an option for us at Northwestern. Probably should have been a requirement, but it was an option. I haven't seen that sort of a class at a lot of other institutions, though. It's something that I wish was more widespread. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about your experience with it, Martin?
Yeah, it actually sadly wasn't a class. It was just something my bassoon teacher at Arizona State required of all of his performance students to do.
Oh.
Is we had to go as part of our, I can't remember which class it was, but there was a secondary bassoon class we had to take. And he made us go sit in for 4 different lessons, one in each area. You had to sit in a vocal lesson, a brass lesson, a string lesson, and another wind lesson.
Yeah.
And so it was a great exercise.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we as educators can encourage just in our own studios on kind of a smaller level with like 3 or 4 a semester. This was like 10 different lesson observations for the class requirement at Northwestern, going back to Lee's question of classes. But yeah, encouraging our students. I teach at Sam Houston State University. I don't know if we said that earlier, but I also teach. Yeah, I think encouraging our students to broaden their horizons a bit in terms of playing for people is really important, for sure. So I just want to, I see a couple people like working on reads and stuff, and I want to have a little read confessional right now, if that's okay. You can all be my witnesses to this. But I know that we had kind of talked, Julie, on the interview a little bit about reads and kind of what I do, and that I'm not, I don't discuss reads all that often. I don't know why. I probably should, but so I only make I make reads like twice a year, and I make 50 reads in one sitting. And depending on how the schedule of the calendar goes, I either do it once or twice a year. And that's it for reed making. Once or twice a year, I make 50 blanks, and then I clip as needed and rotate as needed. Reed rotation, obviously super important to always have reads at different stages. I always talk about that in like any interview that I ever do, having new reads, old reads, medium reads, because you never know what's going to come up. So I got a call in December. I got COVID in November, which was a big bummer, and I was really worried, but I took all the supplements possible and recovered pretty quickly. It was very mild. But I hadn't played my instrument in about a month, and I got a phone call to come fill in for a bassoonist who also got COVID, to play, do a recording session of Strauss's 4 Last Songs as a chamber arrangement, which Strauss is already really challenging for bassoon because you kind of play most of the time, but in a reduction, you play the entire time. The bassoon and the horn just go the whole time in reductions for Strauss. And I got a call to do it that day. Hadn't played in a month, and it was $600, so I couldn't turn it down because there's not that much work to be had right now in the pandemic. And so I said, sure, why not? And I was so glad that I had a range of reeds to choose from for that experience because my chops were in no shape at all. So as soon as I got that call, like the first thing I did was I got my bassoon out. I found an old reed. I ran it through my ultrasonic cleaner, which I don't know if anyone else does that, but I find it keeps my reeds lasting longer by getting the gunk out of them 2 or 3 times in its life. So I did that for a reed. It brightened it up, and then I just did long tones, for like 30 minutes, and my chops are already tired. And I'm like, well, this is going to be interesting today. But point is, I had a reed because I had reeds in different stages in my reed back, even after having not played for a while. So my confessional is that I only make reeds, once or twice a year, and that I buy GSP cane. Oh no! So I get my cane from a Barton cane. Marissa asked how I ultrasonic clean my reeds. So it's a jewelry cleaner. It's you can get it like on Amazon or even like a hardware store. if you put it into the Amazon search box, it's just ultrasonic jewelry cleaner. There's a little basket that comes in it you can take out, and then you just put water on it and you plug it in and you dunk your reed in there, and it sends ultrasonic vibrations into the water and vibrates all the gunk out, and you can see these like plumes of stuff coming out of your reed. And it's normally not too bad, but on students it's real bad. It's real funny to see when students clean their reeds out, just like when they clean their vocals out. It's interesting. I see Martin says Brookstone sells a nice one, if a little expensive. Yeah, I think mine cost about $20, so you don't have to spend a ton on them. I'm sure probably the more expensive ones maybe last longer, or I don't know, vibrate differently. I'm not sure, but it's usually a pretty inexpensive way to try to make your reeds last a little longer. I just use water. Some people will put a little bit of like sugar-free Listerine in there if they're looking to like really, really clean their reeds out, but I usually don't find that that's necessary. And it's not so much about keeping them like clean. It's just about freeing up some of the reeds vibrations that have been dampened just by stuff that gets in them from, being in our mouths. Yeah, so that's ultrasonic cleaning. And then I think GSP cane. I buy from Barton Cane. I love it. They're amazing. Hertzberg Gonzalez is what I've been buying, I think, since I got my jobs 9 years ago, and I haven't looked back. I've tried a few other different kinds of cane from them, but it just works really, really well for me. And I'm the sort of person that once I find something that works, I kind of just stick with it. And if I get good reeds, like really good reeds, 85 to 90% of the time, for me, that's a good enough success ratio to just stick with it. So I applaud all of you who actually do all of your own machining and who are working on reeds right now while I am not. So good job. I want to see what Michael Burns just said in the chat. The legend is that Barber saw notes from the New York Wind Quintet on the hardest chords to play, speak, and tune in the Wind Quintet, and then used them all in summer music by GSP Kane as well. That's a great story. That's interesting. I hadn't heard that before. Summer music, that's one of my favorite woodwind quintets. I love that opening so much. I think it's gorgeous.
They had gone through, I guess, I want to say it was the horn player in the group had made this list of voicings of chords and tunings of chords that were particularly difficult, like what Julie was saying in terms of how the orchestra worked. And Barbara was coming to meet with them about something and saw this like was up on a blackboard or something, and was intrigued and took notes. And then all those lovely keys that we have to play in summer music, and it's like, thanks a lot, guys. But anyway, that's what I've heard from more than one source. I don't know if it's correct, but yes, yay GSP Kane. I think my talk with Julie, I was also feeling guilt and shame about the fact that I'm doing that as well. So yay.
Where do you get your cane from, Michael?
Primarily from Barton, and actually I also use the Hertzberg Gonzalez as one of my primary ones. That's actually what my current favorite reeds are, but I cycle through depending on different times of the year. So I also use some of the Womble Williams stuff, which is Gonzalez and sort of a modified Fox 2, and then sometimes the Darrell Hale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that, Martin. No shame in using GSP, man. Thank you. I feel validated.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in San Antonio right now, and I talk to the San Antonio Symphony bassoons a lot, and I mean, they all use GSP. I mean, they have more time for other things in life than me right now. Like not having to process their tubes, but there's no right way to do it. Whatever works for you, right?
Yeah, that's it, right? There's no like set way to do it. We don't have to be dogmatic about it. And there's a freedom in that you do what works,
Yeah, whatever makes you feel better, sort of thing.
Yeah, when I was in Chicago, at Civic Orchestra, Bill Bookman was the incredible, associate principal bassoon up there. He was my Civic Orchestra coach, and he said that he was discussing with his therapist how reeds affect our our very mood of what we think of ourselves, how we value ourselves, is so often tied to these tiny pieces of cane. And his therapist was trying to understand, why there is this big connection between the two and why they cause so much angst. And it's hard to explain to other people who aren't, double reed players particularly, why it is that they matter just so much, but they really do. And so, yeah, whatever works is well, a good read is a good read. Thank you, Lee. Yeah, absolutely. A good read is a good read, no matter how you get there. Man, I'm telling you, if Leger reeds ever got to the point where they play as good as cane reeds, I would have no problem playing on synthetic reeds. I don't think they're quite there yet, and I have one, and I've tried it, but if they ever get there, there's some students at the University of Texas who just got a rainwater grant to develop another synthetic bassoon, like a combo synthetic bassoon reed. And so it's like a mathematician and a bassoonist and a couple other people, a material scientist person, who are working to develop a better synthetic reed. And I think that's really interesting, that there are people who are trying to solve this crisis for us of always striving for a good reed. So I hope that they're able to come up with something interesting. That's going to be really interesting in the next few decades to kind of see what happens with reed development, especially as our planet continues to change and climate changes, like how that will affect our cane supply and cane availability. Hopefully we do have some sort of synthetic combination option in the future. Yeah, it's an interesting concept.
Amanda, thank you so much.